Do you know Basil the First of the Byzantine Empire? Many historians believe that the story of Basil the First is significant because it provides evidence for an actual rite blessing of same-sex unions in medieval Europe, as well as demonstrating once again how marriage and sexual activities with men are not mutually exclusive, especially in the case of political rulers who were obligated to produce heirs for their kingdoms. Sadly, there is little to no discourse about the matter. While John Boswell and others attempted to initiate a discussion on desire between Byzantine men decades ago, the field reverted to an emphasis on prohibition and an inability to read evidence of same-sex desire between men in the sources. But this doesn't mean their stories aren't worth telling. In fact, it's the total opposite. In this video, we will discuss Byzantine men, the infamous Basil I, same-sex marriage, and the desire to connect emotionally with one another, and how they were able to overcome the challenges and restrictions of their time. Welcome to Crazy Histories, where we bring you the craziest and weirdest facts from human history. Some of the things discussed in this video may be offensive or disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. The Byzantine Empire. The Greek-speaking Eastern Roman Empire of the Byzantine Empire has long been identified with the Orthodox Church. Its city, Constantinople, has been the ecumenical throne of the Patriarch of the First among equals since the 4th century. The 1,000-year-long Byzantine realm produced renowned church luminaries such as St. John Chrysostom and St. Gregory Nazianzus. To go a little deeper, the term Byzantine comes from the ancient Greek colony of Byzantium, which was founded by a man named Byzas. Byzantium's location on the European side of the Bosporus made it an ideal transit and commerce hub between Europe and Asia. The culture of the Byzantine Empire flourished in the centuries preceding the eventual Ottoman invasion in 1453, including literature, art, architecture, law, and theology. Long after its demise, Byzantine culture and civilization continued to have an impact on countries that professed the Eastern Orthodox Church, such as Russia, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece. This is why it's safe to say that the culture of the Byzantine Empire was diverse. So are its people. This is where homosexuality enters the picture. However, there's little discussion about the matter, and even history books do not directly talk about the community whenever they address issues around the topic. As a result, most would think there were no homosexuals during that era, which is not entirely true. Of course, this confusion does not erase the fact that they existed and added so much color to the history of the empire. Homosexuality in the Byzantine Empire. Going back to the question I asked earlier, the exact wording actually used was queens. Dr. Dion C. Smythe, a lecturer in Byzantine history at Queen's University in Belfast, Northern Ireland, took the liberty to address the question. Many people, gay and straight, regard the term queen as having negative overtones, which may cause some people to raise their eyebrows. Because the term homosexual is fairly clinical and the word gay is relatively new at that time, Professor Smythe selected the term queen to describe homosexual men who were upfront about their same-sex attractions. As a result, he closes his investigation by stating that there were no queens in Byzantium, since individuals who displayed same-sex desire were hidden. Smythe thinks that Byzantium was the first closed society because gay people could not be upfront about their same-sex attractions. But it raises another question. Were any homosexuals who were loud and proud of who they were in Byzantium? Most social historians find the question difficult to answer. On the one hand, historical evidence for same-sex relationships in the Byzantine Empire is scant. However, why would Byzantium differ from any other historical period or geographical location when the beginning of time, homosexuals and expressions of homosexual love and desire existed in every time and location? When examining homosexuality throughout the Byzantine period, the only question that actually remains is, were the desires and passions of the Byzantines not like those of other people throughout the history of mankind? This is a question posed by Dr. Alexander Kazhdan, a Soviet-American Byzantine history scholar. The obvious response is that they were. Castration was the listed type of punishment for passive homosexuality in the empire, while there was no penalty for active homosexuality. On the other hand, Emperor Theodosius's code listed burning alive as a penalty for all passive homosexuals. Because of these records, we must therefore conclude that if there were laws prohibiting homosexual behavior and punishments bestowed, particularly on passive homosexual acts, there must have been those who openly expressed same-sex desires strong enough that conservative elites were so triggered that they passed laws to such an extent. If you think the punishment ends here, then think again, because authorities were pretty detailed back then. Other types of conduct were regarded as minor misdemeanors. For example, intercourse between two males was penalized. On the other hand, intercrural intercourse was deemed less of a sin, and individuals who engaged in it could be admitted to the priesthood. Furthermore, two males kissing with desire would be punished just slightly more severely than a man and a woman doing the same act with 40 days of church penance and 100 prostrations. While inciting another guy was considered the same as inciting a woman. A relationship between two women was not seen as a major offense, but sexual acts between adult women were deemed more serious than mutual male intercourse. However, for some reason, lawmakers emphasize that this is less serious than males engaging each other. It's also worth noting that harsher sanctions were intended for females who played the male role in the relationship. Thankfully, this punishment stayed in that era because, aside from being unnecessarily harsh, it just doesn't make sense to punish people for love, which is not a crime despite what era we live in. Basil the First. Of course, we can't forget about Basil the First when discussing proofs of homosexuality in the Byzantine Empire. In fact, his story is significant for providing some evidence for the medieval European rite of church blessing of same-sex unions, as well as demonstrating once again how marriage and sexual activities with men are not mutually exclusive. The existence of a marriage does not preclude the existence of male sexual partners in parallel relationships, particularly in the case of political rulers who were obligated to produce heirs for their kingdoms. The bare bones of Basil's story are that he arrived in Constantinople as a penniless wanderer and finessed friendships with a series of influential men to the point of having an immense political influence of his own, before assassinating his last and most powerful patron, assuming control of the empire, establishing the Macedonian dynasty, and ruling over what is considered Byzantium's most glorious and prosperous era. Basil was befriended by a man named Nicholas from the Church of St. Diomede when he arrived in Constantinople. Two stories make it evident that Nicholas and Basil were married in some kind of official rite of union, with one of them using the term adelphoisis specifically. We will go deeper into what adelphoisis is later, but before that, let's continue to discuss the story of Basil the First. Despite his union with Nicholas, records reveal that Basil the First also had a relationship with Theophilos, who had a great interest in well-born, good-looking, well-built men who were very masculine and strong. As a result, when he saw how brilliant Basil was in these areas, he made him his principal equerry. Basil was claimed to be loved more and more by him with each passing day. Unfortunately, their love didn't last a lifetime, but Basil's encounter with men laid the foundation that indeed homosexuality was present even in the humble empire of Byzantium, and that some sort of union existed between these men. Byzantine gay marriage rites. On October 7th to 20, the Orthodox Church remembers the saints Sergius and Bacchus, who held prominent posts in the Roman army under Emperor Maximian and were eventually killed for their refusal to deny Christ and serve false pagan gods. Unfortunately, the memory of these great saints is frequently twisted and blasphemed today by people seeking to impose their own agenda on the Church. In 1994, Yale professor John Boswell published the book Same-Sex Unions in Pre-Modern Europe, in which he argued that the Byzantine rite of adelphopoiesis, which mentions the martyrs Sergius and Bacchus, was actually a church-sanctioned service of homosexual marriage. Here's how the ceremony unfolds. A priest officiated the wedding in church for two males, and it included symbolism common to Byzantine marriage ceremonies such as holding candles, joining hands, receiving communion, and walking 3 times around a table used in the celebration. Prayers for the sacerdotal blessing related to God creating spiritual brothers and included references to sainted pairings, most notably Sergius and Bacchus, who were known for their friendship. The order of the service varied, but it looked to have a straightforward structure, with requests usually followed by the central prayers of benediction and a dismissal. But a lot of critics think otherwise and argue that there was no such thing as gay marriage during the Byzantine Empire. At most, books suggest that this ceremony does not condone brotherly carnality. Rather, it grants ecclesiastical permission to a relationship that may or may not already include a sexual dimension. The rite does not create a relationship but rather solemnizes it and serves as an articulation point. This is because adelphopoiesis formed a different type of bond than marriage, one that was possibly more akin to adoption, just as its literal translation would suggest. In fact, in the Alphabetical Collection, an encyclopedia of canon law, the 14th century monk Matthew Blasteris discusses adelphopoiesis in the context of adoption, which he then ties to the general subject of kinship, not marriage. Thus, historians believe that there was no such thing as gay marriage as early as in the Byzantine Empire. However, this does not erase the fact that same-sex unions happened, and it's proof that during that era people chose to be united as one with their special person, without much regard to gender or to what other people might say. How about you? Let us know what you think about the Byzantine Empire. Also, make sure to like and subscribe because we will cover more stories in our next video.